Hello, hello. We are back. Thank you so much for joining us again. I am Jennifer Bridgeforth. I am here at the I Am That Woman retreat and movement. We're having some powerful, powerful speakers. We're getting some gifts, some messages, and some wisdom. And we're going to continue to interview these amazing people that have been able to come and share their wisdom and their expertise with us. So right now, from Midwest Legacy Group, I have the opportunity to interview Mr. Christopher Gandy. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's amazing being here, and hopefully I can show up as my true, authentic self for you and answer whatever questions you may have.
I am happy that you are here to do that. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've been busy, but I do want to ask a few questions of things that you brought up during your presentation. There was a lot of good information there. And my first question, just because it's my nature, is going to be a little bigger than just the core or the boundaries, if you will, of the PowerPoint. But let's talk a little bit about the connection between culture versus wealth creation.
Sure.
There seems to be a little bit of a difference when it comes to the belief system of the Black community, whether it is that we operate in a space of kind of fear or of desperation, or our life expectancy has been different, or our culture, the way we have kind of been conditioned to think about money and to act on behalf of money has been a little different in the sense of our experience, particularly in the United States. What can you speak to that will give some insight about what we can do to kind of address the difference between our culture and how that's been a hindrance to wealth creation as a whole?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest thing is that, if you take a step back, all the way back, right? And we go back to, we have to realize a couple of things. One, we have to realize that we have to educate ourselves to be able to make smart decisions financially. Okay, so our parents and our parents' parents were deprived of certain types of education. So because they were deprived of those educations, it was impossible for them to teach it to us in our generation. And so what we've done is we've taken the ones that are the information that's easier to learn, and we've learned that information. But because we are a culture, so if you sprinkle in the idea that we didn't learn the fundamentals of wealth building early on, what we've done is we've been able to acquire them along the way, and that's a very expensive road to go down. And so through experience has created the fear. I think someone asked the question in there is, why I trust you? My answer is, why not?
Yes.
We have nothing to lose.
Yes.
Based on statistical data, we're already losing the game. So we need to change our behavior if we want a different outcome. And part of that is just, we've been asking for years people to make educated information on educated answers on questions they don't even have. So the one thing we have to do is we have to go back and now start the education process, the financial education process, and then ask people to apply it. But we've been asking people to make informed decisions on information they don't have. There's two types of people in this world, the informed and the uninformed.
Right.
And so we have to go back and now look for, how do we inform others? How do we inform ourselves? How do we teach ourselves? What do we need to learn from other cultures? What do we need to mimic? So now we can learn and also teach one generation ahead, one generation behind, i.e. that's where the legacy comes from.
Wonderful. And a little bit of a follow-up. Do you feel that there needs to be a conversation that transcends the financial industry when it comes to our perceived value? Because I think that there is a connection or a link between our worthiness or our understanding or belief of worthiness and finances. We may feel like we're not worthy of having conversations that yield a higher return for kind of long-term planning. To your point, which you were discussing even with our parents and our grandparents, where they may not have life insurance, they had burial insurance.
Yes.
Right? So you had a grandparent who was proud that they had $8,000 in burial insurance. And I
right.
thought I could have just gave you $8,000. Why is that a
Right.
policy, right? So what conversation do you think we should have collectively as a community that kind of speaks to the idea of our value being great enough that the financial planning is important?
Sure. Well, I think we are the one that has the seat at the table. So I heard someone say the other day, which was so interesting, is it all starts with us. Mm-hmm. And so there's certain words that remind us that it starts with us. And when we have that seat at the table, it starts inside of us. That's where the word insight starts within. That's where intuition starts within. That's what invitation starts within. So it starts within ourselves. So the first thing we have to do is we have to look inward at ourselves and do some discovery there to figure out why is it that we feel like we don't have the value. We have to start there. So if we start to understand that we can do it because other people can do it, we're just as good as them. We breathe the same air they breathe. We walk the same walk they walk. We go work the same way we do. But I think what's happened is we become a victim of the circumstance of where we came from. And what we do is we start to believe that. We start to believe that, internalize it, and then start to profess it for others. And so that is where our personality is, and that is where, at the end of the day, it's looked down upon for you to want more. For you to, we're in our community, it's, oh, you're a sellout, you moved across this, you did this, it's almost a bad thing.
Right.
For us to be able to transcend our boundaries and where we are in our cultural sense. For us to be able to do that, we have to do it differently. We have to actually reach back and help others be able to see it in themselves. And a lot of that has to do with, I think, our community leaders.
Yes.
They may be leaders in our community, but they move out of the community. Right? It also, I think...
representation matters, and the consistent representation matters.
I think the idea of this is when you start to look at certain communities, you see liquor stores, you see payday loan places. You don't see thriving financial companies in the middle of some of those neighborhoods, and the reason why you don't see that is because it's perceived that there's no wealth there. But you and I both know there's significant wealth there. You just don't know where it's at.
Right.
And so because of that, we have to change that. We have to now start asking the big companies, if we're going to spend money with the big companies, we're going to spend money with these companies, we got to start demanding to them at the end of the day, if you want our money, you want access, you're going to have to actually start investing in our communities, in our education, and our applications so we can become better for ourselves and start to recreate that. If not, then we have to really start thinking about what are we really doing with our money, and are we really being intentional and purposeful with who we actually spend it with? Because if we're not thinking about that along the way, we're actually going the opposite of what we say we want to do. And that then internally is pulling against what our alignment is. So that actually makes us, as you know, out of alignment. And when we're out of alignment, we tend to not actually achieve the things that we can achieve.
Yes.
Or are capable, what we were capable of achieving.
Yes. So my last question, one of the things that we have talked about a lot in these interviews is being in the space of the guests here, the speakers here, everyone who's had the gift of being in this moment. You may be at a space where you're starting right where you are, right? So it may be ground zero. It may be you are better off than you were 3 to 5 years ago, 3 to 5 months ago, but kind of having those conversations about foundationally starting right where you are and not having any shame in that position. What would be a recommendation for you from a financial standpoint of someone being able to start, and of course all of our right where we are different, but what would be a recommendation about how we can start right where we are? What would be some best practices?
Well, I think the best thing you can do is just forget where you came from and start, like you said, from here, and start to put some goals on paper. I talk about the 9 inches, right? The 9 inches between our head and our heart actually will drive our behaviors. So many times we lead with this and that's where the fear comes from. And other times we lead with this and that's logical, but it doesn't move us to action. We got to look at the 9 inches in between, and it takes courage. Courage is never rewarded. So it takes courage to go out there and leap. and start to write down some of these goals that we have for ourselves. And what I mean by our goals is the things that make you smile when you say them. Not the things that are comfortable saying, like, okay, I want to have $10,000 next year. Is that really stretching you to where you need to be? Because I'd rather have $60,000, and if I come up with 10, I came up a little short, but I still had more than 10.
Right.
So I think that is part of the challenge, is that we've got to think abundantly, because we've thought so long, because we've been in that bubble, in that space, that for you to win, I got to lose. And so I want you to win, so I win, and because you win, because I win, and even if you win and I don't win, I'm going to win, because the universe doesn't lie. The universe will reward us because we did the right thing, and we did it with intent, and we did it without expectation. There's something called a selfless leader. When you give enough, it all comes back to you tenfold over. So if you're doing that with enough people that are out there that are listening, is start to write down 12 months from today, here are the absolute, and I have one more for you, so don't hang up on me. But listen, here are the 5 things that absolutely has to happen between now and the next 12 months. Mm-hmm. See, here's what I didn't say. The difference between an interest and a commitment is convenience. I'll say it again. The difference between an interest and a commitment is convenience.
Right.
So what people have a tendency to do is they overcommit to things. So many of these things that we talked about today, they're interests. Mm-hmm. And did you realize in life we have so many interests, but we can only pursue so many of them at one time? And so how many things are they absolutely committed to? My son, I'm absolutely committing to love him regardless of what's going on in his life. That is how it works, right? I'm absolutely committed to doing that. So that's a non-negotiable, right? If somebody said, well, you can either love your son, okay, done conversation.
We're finished.
It's a done conversation. It is what it is. And so we start to look at what are we absolutely committed to. We start to realize that we have to say no to certain things. And if we are committed to those things, and we write those things down, they're more likely to happen than if they don't. So here's what I'll tell you is that the first commitment we got to make is to ourselves. Mm-hmm. That's number one. And if we don't commit to ourselves, how can we commit to these other things? So I would say narrow the commitments to 1 or 2 and do those commitments. And if you do those commitments, it's not just for convenience, you'll be able to execute on those things.
And those things are actionable.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank
Absolutely.
you. We so appreciate you being here. All of the information that we've received in your session has been life-changing. There's going to be a table here so we can come back and get some more information, talk about some of our personal experiences or needs. But we are grateful to you. Thank you so much for being here with the I Am That Woman movement and retreat. And of course, we will be back later with another powerful and amazing and inspiring speaker. Thank you. Continue to love and stay tuned.